So I know the Blackmagic Pocket 4K is out and everybody loves it. It's great. I've never used it, but I know well enough. And here's a catch. I don't want to get real techie about this. This video might be a little techie, but I don't want to get techie about other cameras. What I'm here to talk about is the Blackmagic Micro Cinema camera. This came out around 2012, and you could say it is the actual direct predecessor to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. So basically I'm going to break down the rig itself, what everything does. There'll be links in the description so you can get this exact setup if you want. Okay, so first off is the cage. The cage is a small rig Blackmagic Micro Cinema camera cage. I believe it was around $100. To be honest, that was the hardest bullet to bite. And now I don't see living without it. Like you can't live without a cage. On the bottom here, we have a universal VCT plate with 15mm rods, and that's by Small Rig as well. Now Small Rig has several versions of this where there's like quick release on the bottom, but this is like the most basic one. Now these rods are actually from a Neewer shoulder rig. So these are the same rods, actually the same handle as well. And then where things start to get interesting is the battery that I use is a Talentcell. It's Chinese brick. Matthew Scott. I found about these bricks through him, and they're great. They last forever. Like, I might shoot with this thing for a couple days before I even charge it. So it's got USB 5 volt, 12 volt in and out. That's how you charge it. And then you have 9 volt out, which I rarely ever use. The Blackmagic takes 12 volt in, which is why I got this CGPRO little module. It basically goes right into the link port, which gives me, that's not the link port, I forget what it's called. It looks like a VGA output. So this little module gives me DC in, so I can actually just plug a DC cable in. And then it also has a link if I ever want to get a record controller to put on the handle, which I used to think that I might want, kind of don't care. People talk a lot of smack about the menu and the buttons on the Blackmagic Micro. It sucks at first. You get used to it, and like the worst thing I can say now is select and the left key or the rewind key. Sometimes I get those mixed up, like when I'm not even looking. You get used to it. I have that 12 volt going into this. Actually, I send it to the monitor a lot more now, so I don't have to have this battery on here. So I can send it to both because my monitor and my camera actually take 12 volt in. And the battery life on the Canon LPE6s for the Blackmagic Micro, easy 45 minutes. Not including the monitor. If I have 3 LPE6s, I'm comfortable with like a 5-hour shoot, 4.5-hour shoot, something like that. And that might be including like setup time. So all the more to have the power solution. Then the Portkeys LH5T monitor. It's a 5-inch. It receives 4K. It's a 1080 screen, but it can input 4K. The reason I got this 3D LUTs for under $300 is bonkers, and it's great. I've actually only owned it and used it for 36 hours. I've actually been running tests on it a lot these past 2 days. So I'm excited to see it in the field. It's actually, the camera tests made me so much more confident about shooting with the Micro, and we'll get into that later. To attach the monitor to the camera cage, I have this Small Rig monitor attachment. It's a little swivel guy, and it's great. Absolutely love it. So after that, we come to the EF-BMPCC Speedbooster. This was originally made for the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, the original. So that one is actually the most compatible for the Blackmagic Micro. There are a few others. There's the Blackmagic Cinema camera, and then there's the Micro Four Thirds. And if you go onto Metabones' website, they will actually show you which ones will work but aren't optimal, and which ones will fit but are actually bad for the camera. I forget which ones, but the BMMCC is the best for the micro. The BMMCC, what it'll do is it increases the field of view, it increases your lens aperture, and it will increase some light to the sensor. So you generally will gain an extra stop and a half, something like that, maybe a little less than that. I was reading stuff anywhere between the natural crop factor on the micros at 2.7 all the way to the 3.1. I felt like the 2.7 was a little closer on the nose, so this brings it down to a 1.8, which is kind of like an ASPC sensor, which is fine. Super 35's ASP. It's essentially a Super 35 now. Normally I have the 24mm Sigma on here, so with that crop, it's closer to like a 45mm, which is great. Turns out I really love it. So, and then another thing is, so basically to attach the battery, so this is a small rig, 15mm rod clamp, and it has all these holes. And then I got me a little cheese plate that I attached to the 15mm rods, and then I got some Velcro. Yeah, so that was my solution to that, which works great. Like I said, I've had this rig for a little under a year. So what do I think about this thing? Personally, I love this camera, but it took a while for me to love it. Going from a DSLR to a cinema camera, financially, it's not a big jump. To me, it feels like a whole different shooting process. And that's mostly because you're working with log, but you're actually working with real log. You're not working with 8-bit log from like a Sony mirrorless camera. You can't really push and pull too much on that stuff. It tends to break apart. I used Magic Lantern for about 2 years, so the raw workflow didn't bother me. It was all about image quality with me. That jump from a DSLR, even when I was working with raw, was way different. I felt like I had to relearn exposure, but having LUTs on this thing really changes the game when it comes to my exposure, which was kind of like the last gripe that I had with this thing. To be honest, me operating this camera without having a LUT on board was cutting corners, so to speak, and I think this camera is finally complete. Like, I couldn't think of another thing that I would need for this. Been using it on commercials and music videos, and the quality is amazing. It blows my mind. So, if you have any questions about the Blackmagic Micro, if you're thinking about getting one, hit me up in the comments. I'd be stoked to talk about it and tell you the pros and cons. I don't want this channel to be techie. I don't want it to be reviewy. This is just a camera that not a lot of people use. I feel like it was probably never that popular of a camera. You know, me being someone who has used it for a while, enjoys it, has a unique rig that I thought it might be valuable to those who might be thinking about it, might be on the fence, and find this video and decide, yeah, I'd like it, or no, I wouldn't. So I thought that might be valuable to those people looking for that. So I hope that helps.